shirt a bit. Okay. Alright, let's see. Everything should be working now. Had a little bit of technical difficulty there. Computer decided it did not want to cooperate, so here I am again on my phone because I still do not have a webcam one of these days. Excuse me. Delightful beverage. Okay, so here we are once again with the video blog or vlog or whatever you wish to call it on writing and such. I know it's been a while. I know I said I would try and do these a little bit more regularly, and I'm sorry, but life got in the way. So here we are. We are doing it now, and I hopefully will be doing this every 2 weeks or so. Hopefully, I will be trying to do that. So today, we're going to be talking about the second published book, and a collection titled Campfire Stories. Here's the title, and I know it's backwards to you guys, to all of you, and you can see the reflection of my monitor with my notes in it. Give me one moment. That's the cover of Campfire Stories. I know it's backwards. And Campfire Stories is essentially, it's a collection of almost all the published stories. I had completed a number of stories. The two that were in With Eyes Open, all the stories that were in here, two of the stories that are in the next collection, A Bright Symmetry. And I send them out, and everybody kept saying things along the lines of, "It's not for us." Okay. All right, it's not for you. That's nice. That's great. What is for you? It's the frustrating part of publishing, because you look and you say, well, the story that I sent you sounds like it's an exact fit for the criteria that you put online or in Writer's Digest, Writer's Guide, whichever source you're using, but you're telling me that it's not for you. You know, you're dealing with editors, and they're getting inundated with stories. You may have heard of the slush pile. Stories come in, they go in the slush pile, and editors and assistant editors, and probably interns also, go through that slush pile. And you have, if you're lucky, you have a page to get the editor's attention. And from there, they decide if they want to publish your story. Now, sometimes it gets right down to, do I publish this author that I've published before and I know, or do I publish this person that I've never heard of before? They're going to go with the person they know. So, after years, hi Bruce, thanks for watching. After years of sending out the stories, I'd said enough already. And that's when I decided to start self-publishing. And the previous book, With Eyes Open, was my first attempt at that. I kept that one purposely short so I can learn the ropes, ease my way into it. And then I came to Campfire Stories, which is the next 8 stories. No, I shouldn't say the next 8. It's 8 more stories of the ones that I had completed and had tried to send out. There were a few more, like I said, 2 stories from A Bright Symmetry, which we'll talk about next time. A story called Wanderer, which I'm working on right now to get it ready to submit on its own. And actually, the last book that I just published, Brianna and the Three, used to be part of Campfire Stories, but when I was putting Campfire Stories together, it just was not in any shape to be published. And it really needed the extra work and time that I had to put into it to get it ready for publication. So, about Campfire Stories. It is, as I said, a collection of 8 stories published back in 2013. Um, with the exception of the final story, everything here had been sent out numerous times. 3 of them were actually published. And, well, when I say published, they were included on online magazines and made exactly $0 off them. Not that I'm writing for money, it's never been about the money, but it would be nice. The stories are... Okay, before I get into the individual stories, just a little bit about my fictional universe. All my stories, all the 7 books, all the stories that have been published, everything that will be published from here on, take place in the same universe. It's the same fictional universe. It's kind of similar to ours, but a little bit different. It stretches from 13.8 billion years plus 1 day in the past. And I'll explain that 1 day in a moment. And it stretches right now to about the year 7968, which is when Brianna and the Three takes place. Now, because of this, because all the stories take place in the same timeline, if there's characters that exist at the same time and interact with each other, it's quite possible that one could, quote-unquote, guest star in another story. And you'll see that in... actually, you've seen part of it in A Voice in the Darkness in With Eyes Open. You see it again in On a Cold Wind, which is several books down the road. And there are also, of course, immortals, vampires, and werewolves that pop up here and there and under assumed names. So, one last thing before we get into the stories. If you haven't read them yet, I'm sorry, but to quote River Song, spoilers. I'll try and keep it to a minimum, but there are going to be some spoilers. So, on to the stories. And these are all arranged in the order that they would appear in the timeline, not in the order that I wrote them. So the first one is titled The End of Seconds. And just takes place, as I have noted here, a long time ago. 13.8 billion years plus 1 day in the past, to be exact. Just a quick outline. In the aftermath of a failed time travel experiment, the universe previous to this one comes to an end. There is one survivor, an observer named Aricia Mastani. Existing as a being of pure energy, Aricia releases the energy that had destroyed her home universe, giving rise to the new one. And this was an idea I'd been bouncing around for a while. The late Carl Sagan, in the original and in my humble opinion, the better Cosmos series, once at the start of the series said, the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. But I was always wondered what came before it. So that's where the basic idea, what came before the Big Bang. So I postulated that in the universe previous to this one, there was a highly advanced species of humanity that were allied with another alien race, and they had perfected time travel. Essentially, the travelers, known as observers, download their consciousness into a computer, and they travel back through time as energy. They can't interact, that's why they only observe. So they decided to enact an experiment to travel back to the beginning of their universe to witness its origin. And this alien race said, no, we can't do that. You know, essentially their version of God forbids it. And of course the human scientists say, piffle, and do it anyway. So of course one thing leads to another, and the universe is destroyed. So uh, I was thinking of, as the story progressed, I started thinking of a little bit of Hindu philosophy, their theory that the universe exists, then it's destroyed, then it's born again, it exists, it's destroyed, it's born again, in a almost cyclic manner. So I started thinking, what if that happened regularly? What if the universe we know, the universe they knew, wasn't the first universe? There's a whole series of universes before them, each one destroyed because they tried to figure out how it had been created. So that's why the story begins and ends with quotes from Hindu scripture. The end of seconds begins with actually a pretty well-known quote. Oppenheimer used it, said it when he at the detonation of the first atomic bomb. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, from the Bhagavad Gita, and ends with a quote from the Rig Veda. Who knows for certain? Who here shall declare it? Whence was it born? Whence came creation? The gods are later than this world's formation. Who then can know the origins of the world? No one knows whence came creation, and whether he has or has not made it. He who surveys it from the lofty skies, only he knows, or perhaps he knows not. I thought that best fit the story, and it kind of answers another question. I was raised Catholic, and even when I was a kid, I would ask, where did God come from? Because I can always accept the existence of an all-powerful being who can create all of existence with the snap of his fingers, but even all-powerful beings had to come from somewhere, and nobody would ever give me an answer. I mean, you open up the Bible, you go to the first page of Genesis, and God said, "Let there be light." But wait a minute, where did God come from? And that's the other part of this. I always used to describe the story as the death of one universe, the start of the next, and answers that uncomfortable question: so where did God come from? Because it ends with Aricia, as she's releasing the energy, saying, maybe we'll get it right this time. Maybe the ancients were right. She releases the energy and says, "Let there be light." So that's the first story. Aricia does pop up every now and again. She does pop up in a couple of different forms in A Bright Symmetry, but again, we'll get to that later. The second story is called Games of Life and Cold. It's a step into a little bit of a horror story, but not much. I don't know exactly when this one takes place. I have it noted here as unknown year, because it takes place sometime in the past. Originally, this was going to be the first of a series of stories about a group of genetically engineered beings called, in their language, Zentarna. In English, it's Sentinels. But it kind of fell apart on me, and I just decided, well, let's just stick with the one. If I can figure out something later on, then I'll do it. But basically, hello, Christine. Basically, a group of genetically engineered explorers known as the Sentinels or Zentarna are exploring an uninhabited planet. Their exploration is interrupted by the arrival of the Skadikians, a race that believes itself to be superior to every other race. And it's kind of fits in with the way I plan a lot of my stories. It's a good situation that goes bad. So there's these beings, they're exploring the planet, and then essentially they're invaded. These other aliens come by, and one member of the team is kidnapped and experimented on, almost killed, and it's ends up being a struggle for survival. As I said, this was supposed to be the first of a series of stories that would lead from the origin of the Sentinels um, to in the future, and they're invading Earth. And one of the reasons it kind of fell apart on me was I don't like alien invasion stories. They make no sense to me. Why would an alien race invade Earth for natural resources when they can go to the Oort cloud and the Kuiper belt at the edge of the solar system and we'd never know they were there? It just seems so much easier, but whatever. Um, I have to be honest, I don't remember too many details um, about the project overall. Uh, these aliens, I did create a language for them. I do quote a few words in there. Um, and sometimes I actually use them in real life. If anybody actually ever hears me refer to somebody as a deflector, yeah, I'm just calling him an asshole. Um, Third story. These next couple of stories actually, it's kind of like my Twilight Zone stories, if you will. The first is called If You Listen Softly. And this one is set in 2005. A writer wakes up to find an unknown woman in bed with him. The problem is he's lived alone since the death of his wife. To further complicate things, he's the only one who doesn't know who the woman is. And like I said, it was kind of my attempt to evoke the feel of the Twilight Zone. In fact, I think the main character does reference the Twilight Zone uh, while he's trying to figure out what's going on. It had me thinking that I don't know if you would actually say it's a almost a religious theme, somebody looking out for us. Um, it's kind of a riff on the old saying, "Nature abhors a vacuum." It just made me think that maybe there is actually more to this world than we know, and maybe that there are forces here that are trying to work to our advantage. It gets a little mystical at the end, but it kind of all works. The second Twilight Zone story, if you will, is called All My Yesterdays Remembered. And this one is set in 2009. Author Tom Stengel welcomes his lifelong friend Lisa Stennis home for their 20-year high school reunion, and she reveals to Tom and his wife Bonnie that she's immortal. And this one grew from the idea that we think we know our friends, especially those we've known since childhood, but everybody has a secret. Um, it bounces back and forth, tracing with some flashbacks into when they were younger, and then coming back to the present, and the hints that were dropped along the way to hint at Lisa's actual condition. And then then there's the reveal at the end in in Tom's house when she reveals that she's immortal. And this is I think one of the first times I actually quote I think it's Byron. Give me a quick moment here. My fading memory is gone. Oh, yeah, it is Lord Byron from The Prisoner of Shalon. My Immortals kind of have adopted this as almost like a mantra. They do change two words. The actual quote is, I had not strength to stir or strive, but felt that I was still alive. A frantic feeling when we know that what we love shall ne'er be so. I know not why I could not die. I had no earthly hope but faith, and that forbade a selfish death. Now my immortals, when they say it, they change. I know not why I could not die to I know not why I cannot die. And multiple people will look at them and say, that's not the way the lines go. Yeah. Oh, and the story of Lisa Stennis is not finished. And this brought my immortals back into my history. I have several immortal characters. Excuse me. The elixir of life, don't you know? I have several immortal characters, and as I said, a couple of them do show up under different names. Some of them go under their birth names. Some of them are assumed names. Some of them are both. Yeah, and third, this is the third of the quote-unquote Twilight Zone stories. This is called Symmetry, set in 2010. Rosalind Hart wakes up to find herself in a subway car passing through an unnaturally dark and long tunnel. She has no idea how she got on the subway or who the train's conductor really is. And this leads to life-altering changes as Rosalind has to take the place of death. This kind of goes along the same lines as If You Listen Softly, that there are other forces at work here on Earth. Perhaps there is a personification of death that helps souls move along, either to be reincarnated or moved on to whatever comes next. My own personal feeling is we're all going to find out soon enough. Why fret about it? And I just thought it interesting, because if you're going to have a conversation with death, what better place to do it than a subway train? And it just, the world is in balance, and that balance has to be maintained. So if death decides he doesn't want to be death anymore, then somebody has to take his place. And Rosalind, somebody who doesn't feel like her life has any course or direction, is the one who's going to do it, whether she likes it or not. Now we jump ahead a bit into the future, and this is where I start getting a bit optimistic. Or you could say very optimistic, given the way things are going now. The next story is called Signpost. It's set in 2114, and by this time, Earth has figured out how to travel faster than light to some degree, and they have started to build starships and are expanding out. Essentially, it's kind of like Enterprise without the crappy theme song. Basically, on a survey mission to an uncharted, uninhabited world, the exploration cruiser Firefox finds signs pointing to a legendary race known as the Mengarans. Their chief contact officer, Commander Tamara Barron, discovers the fate of the Mengarans and hints at what might be the future of humanity. In my in my fictional timeline, there are several very old races. There's the Ovestori and the Vastalara, which hopefully we'll be getting to soon. But the Mengarans are the oldest. The Mengarans were the first race to evolve. If anybody's watched Babylon 5, they're essentially the equivalent of the first ones. And I started thinking, what would a race that was the first to evolve after the Big Bang, given billions of years of evolution, billions of years longer than anybody else, what would they possibly have evolved into? What would their outlook be like? And would they actually even be beyond the need for physical bodies? And yeah, they're beyond the need of physical bodies. they they are trying to keep in touch with the physical universe. They've evolved beyond it. Okay, they're not even energy beings. They're beyond that. And they are trying to keep in touch. To them it's a moment, to us it's 1,000 years. They speak once every 1,000 years, but no one's there to listen. And it's at this planet, which is where they can make contact with our physical universe, but nobody's ever there to hear them talk except this one time when Firefox and Tamara happened to be there. And one of the things I tried to bring out was how lonely they are. It's them. They have no real contact. They can't contact anybody else unless it's at that 1,000-year time. As Tamara says, it's kind of like if rather than going out into space, if humans decided to sit around and wait for ants to develop language skills. Kind of like that. And I may go back to revisit the Mengarans, and we may see a descendant of Tamara's, maybe. Now, the next story, it's called Last Light. It's set in 2189, which is one of my favorite time periods. I have a lot of stories set around this time. On a Cold Wind is set in 2189. I have several stories. Wanderer, Raven, which is in editing right now. Stranger, which is still being written. Those all take place in 2189 and concern, it's called EarthGov Security. By 2114, Earth has gotten its act together. There is EarthGov. There is a central Earth government. The countries, as we more or less recognize them today, still exist. They can still control their own internal, affairs. EarthGov takes care of everything else. EarthGov is there to administer the colonies. EarthGov is there to essentially negotiate treaties with non-terrestrial races. EarthGov is there to protect Earth. EarthGov administers the fleet and has a division called Colonial Affairs, which controls colonies and all that. EarthGov Security are essentially the feds. As I said, say, for example, in the United States, you can take care of your own problems, but if something steps up, and then EarthGov is sent in. And Last Light is one of the first stories concerning EarthGov Security Division 5. Now, Division 5, excuse me. Can I call you back in a little bit? I'm in the middle of my Facebook Live. Bye. Sorry. Where was I? Oh, yeah. EarthGov Security Division 5 technically takes care of everything outside the solar system. Special Agent Carlin Adrastia becomes involved in a hostage crisis, though she tries to end the standoff without injury. The hostage taker is killed and Agent Adrastia is injured. This was originally supposed to be part of On a Cold Wind, but it didn't really fit. So I pulled it out and used it on its own. It's basically just essentially a hostage situation. Nothing really fancy about it, except that Carly is an enhanced human, meaning she's genetically engineered to be stronger, faster, sharper senses, and all. And the last story is called The Shape of the Truth. Again, like Last Light, it was supposed to be part of a larger work, but it wasn't fitting in with what was planned for the larger work, so I pulled it out and had it go on its own. While visiting friends at, and it takes place in 2196, so about 7 years after Last Light. While visiting friends on Argosy Station, contract investigator Dari Locke is hired by Confed Security to track down a fugitive. A member of a race of shapeshifters known as the Children of Leja, Dari has to deal with prejudice and the knowledge that the fugitive is also a member of her race. This character was interesting. It got some interesting reactions from some people who read it before it was published. I had one person who read it and essentially, she said that she wanted me to tell a better story. She basically wanted me to tell the story the way she wanted it told. There's a scene in there where Dari is just buying something to drink, and the clerk makes an inappropriate comment, and she doesn't know how to react and just walks away. This person basically said that she should have torn the guy a new one, and as she was storming away, grew an arm out of her back and flipped him off. And my explanation was, no, that would attract unnecessary attention, and she doesn't know what this means. So, but it was an attempt at trying to show a truly alien race and what she does to fit in, and how she looks at the world that we know, and a lot of things that maybe we might take advantage. And again, like Lisa, the story of Dari Locke is not finished, and I really should get back to that longer work. Yeah. So that's the 8 stories of Campfire Stories. It's been interesting to think back on them again. Everything, like all the other books, Campfire Stories is available from Smashwords, Amazon, both ebook and print on demand, iTunes, Nook, CreateSpace for print on demand. Generally speaking, the ebook is $5.99. Excuse me. The print on demand is $7.99. And the links can be found on the books tab on my website, Word Boys Words, and I'll put the address down in the comments. So thanks, Bruce, Christine, for listening, and anyone who's watching this later on Facebook or when I put it up on YouTube, thank you. Any questions after this is finished, you can get to me on Facebook, put them in the responses, and thank you all for watching, listening, and hopefully I'll see you in about 2 weeks for A Bright Symmetry. Thanks, everyone. Bye.